The waiter didn't say her name out loud, but he didn't need to. The pause was enough. The little handheld machine chirped once, sharp and final, and he looked down at it, then back at her, eyes soft in a way that felt worse than irritation. She felt the heat rush to her face before he even spoke. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "It didn't go through." For half a second, the world narrowed to the space between her chest and her throat. Air went in, but it didn't feel like it reached anywhere useful. She forced a laugh that sounded wrong even to her own ears and slid the card back across the table, like it might somehow behave differently the second time. "Can you try again?" she asked, already knowing the answer. The machine chirped again. Louder this time, final. The people at the table behind them laughed at something stupid, forks clinking against plates, life continuing at a pace that suddenly felt cruel. She stared at the red numbers on the screen, as if they were lying to her, as if this whole thing could still be undone if she just looked long enough. I, I'm sorry, she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I thought I had it. I really did." Her hands shook as she pushed her chair back. She could feel the panic climbing now, fast and hot, the kind that made her want to disappear into the floor. She reached for her purse, fingers clumsy, already counting the cash she knew wasn't there. $12. That was it. $12 and a whole lot of pride she suddenly wished she could trade in for something useful. He hadn't said anything yet. That silence was louder than the machine. It stretched, thick and heavy, and in it she filled in every thought she imagined running through his head. "This is a mistake. This is embarrassing. I should have known better." She stood up too fast, chair legs scraping against the concrete. "I can just go," she said, voice thin. "You don't have to." "Hey," he said finally. Not loud, not sharp, just enough to stop her. They were outside now, the check already settled in some quiet way she hadn't watched happen. The bench sat a few feet away from the cafe tables, worn smooth by years of people waiting, arguing, kissing, leaving. She sank onto it without really deciding to, shoulders folding inward, like she was trying to make herself smaller. The city looked tired. Street lights flickered on, one by one, casting a dull glow over the sidewalk. Cars rolled past, windows up, radios on. Everyone else sealed inside their own lives. "I'm really sorry," she said again, staring at the ground. "I don't usually do this. I budget. I'm careful. It's just, today wasn't a good day." She pressed her hand over her mouth when her voice broke. She hated that part most of all. Crying made things messy. Crying made people uncomfortable. She wiped at her eyes with the heel of her palm and laughed again, sharp and humorless. "Guess that's my cue to disappear, huh?" He still didn't answer right away. She felt his presence beside her, steady and quiet. She didn't look at him. She couldn't. If she saw pity on his face, she wasn't sure she could handle it. If she saw annoyance, it would hurt even more. In her head, the night replayed itself in cruel detail. The moment she'd checked her balance earlier that day and thought, "It'll be fine." The way she'd chosen water instead of soda, pretending it was a preference. The way she'd smiled when she ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, hoping he wouldn't notice. She noticed everything. Every little choice she made to survive showed up now, loud and obvious. "This is so embarrassing," she muttered. "I swear I'm not irresponsible. I just, things add up. Rent, meds, life. It gets heavy." That was the truth she hated admitting. Life got heavy and she was tired of carrying it alone. But saying that out loud felt dangerous. The city hummed around them, indifferent. Somewhere nearby, someone called out a name. A bus sighed as it pulled away from the curb. Normal sounds from a normal night, while she sat on a bench wondering if this was the moment she'd look back on as the one that finally convinced her to stop trying. By the fifth paragraph of this story, if you're listening right now, I want to pause for a second and say this. Welcome to Sunshine's home. Drop in the comments where you're watching from and how's the weather over there. I'm curious to know how you're faring and how far my stories travel. She shifted on the bench, wiping her hands on her jeans, trying to calm the tight buzzing in her chest. "You don't have to sit here with me," she said softly. "You can go. I won't be offended." That wasn't true. She would be offended. She would be hurt. but she would understand. Understanding had become her specialty. He looked at her then. Really looked. She felt it without lifting her eyes. The weight of his attention wasn't sharp or judgmental. It was steady, grounded. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Something about the way he said it made her chest ache. Not relief, fear, because staying meant seeing her. Staying meant this moment mattered. She finally glanced at him. He sat with his hands folded loosely between his knees, posture controlled, like someone who had learned the hard way that falling apart wasn't an option. His jaw was tight, but not with anger, with restraint. "I didn't mean for tonight to be like this," she said. "I was excited. I don't get excited about dates anymore." "Neither do I," he said. That surprised her. She let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Yeah? Yeah." Another pause settled between them, but this one felt different, less sharp, less dangerous. She swallowed and took a risk. "I work part-time," she said. "I have a condition that messes with my back. Some days are better than others. I try not to let it define me, but sometimes it wins." He nodded once, slow, not interrupting, not fixing. "I don't talk about it much," she added quickly, afraid she was saying too much. "I don't want people thinking I'm a problem." She expected him to reassure her, to say something comforting and polite. Instead, he was quiet again, and that scared her more than anything else. In the silence, her thoughts ran wild. She imagined him standing up, thanking her for the evening, and walking away with a polite smile he'd forget by morning. She imagined herself replaying this night every time she opened her banking app, every time she passed this cafe, every time someone suggested dinner. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, ready to stand, ready to leave before he could. "I should go," she said, more firmly this time. "I don't want this to be awkward." Her foot shifted, heel scraping against the concrete. He turned his head toward her. "Wait." The word was quiet, but it stopped her cold. She froze, half standing, heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. He opened his mouth like he was about to say something important, and then he paused. That pause stretched, heavy and charged, and whatever he was about to say hung in the air between them, unfinished, waiting. He reached into his wallet before she could say another word. Not fast, not slow, just steady. She noticed everything in that moment. The way his hand didn't shake, the way he didn't sigh or look around to see who was watching. He slid his card across the table like this was normal, like this wasn't the exact kind of moment people warned each other about. "No," she said quickly, sitting up. "You don't have to do that." "I know," he replied. That was it. No speech, no explanation, no heavy tone that made it feel like charity. He handed the card to the waiter and nodded once, calm and sure. The machine beeped. Approved. Her chest tightened, not with relief but with something sharper. A mix of gratitude and fear. She hated owing people, hated the feeling that came with it, the quiet math that started running in her head about balance and power, and who would feel small later. "Thank you," she said, voice low. "I really didn't mean—" "I know," he said again, cutting her off gently. "You don't need to explain." That should have helped. Instead, it made her uneasy. They moved back to the bench without talking about it. The city air felt cooler now, the kind that crept under your collar and reminded you it was getting late. She wrapped her arms around herself, not because she was cold, but because she didn't know where to put her hands. He sat beside her, close enough to feel his presence, far enough to give her space. That distance felt chosen, thoughtful. "I'm not embarrassed for you," he said after a while. She blinked and looked at him. "I didn't ask if you were." "I know," he said, "but you look like you think I am." She laughed under her breath, sharp and tired. "I guess I'm used to people being—" He nodded like that answer made sense to him. "Yeah, me too." She studied his face now, really studied it. He didn't look like someone who had never struggled. There were lines near his eyes that spoke of long nights and early mornings, the kind of tired that sleep alone didn't fix. "You didn't flinch," she said, more to herself than to him. He tilted his head. "At what?" "At all of it." She waved a hand between them. The card, the awkwardness, the whole mess. He considered that. Why would I? That question landed heavier than she expected. Because people do, she thought. Because money gets weird. Because dates are fragile things and one wrong move can crack them clean in half. I've had worse nights, he said. She raised an eyebrow. That's not comforting. He smiled faintly. Wasn't meant to be. Just honest. He leaned back against the bench, eyes on the street ahead. Cars passed in streaks of white and red. For a moment, she thought he might leave it there. But then he spoke again, quieter. There was a time I stood in a grocery store with 2 kids and a cart full of food I couldn't afford, he said. I did the math 3 times, hoping it would change. It didn't. She stayed still, afraid to interrupt. I left the cart there, he continued, walked out like I forgot something. The kids thought it was a game. Her throat tightened. She could picture it too easily. The shame. The way you smile so the people you love don't see what's happening inside you. I drove home and fed them cereal for dinner, he said. Told them it was breakfast night. She swallowed. I'm sorry. He shrugged, but there was weight in it. I'm not. They were fed. That's what mattered. She looked away, the city lights blurring for a second. Being understood like this felt risky, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with romance. You didn't know me, she said softly. You still don't. You could have decided this wasn't worth it. I could have, he agreed. Her heart skipped. She waited for the rest. But I didn't, he said. Silence settled again. But it felt different now. Less sharp, more open. She picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. I don't like being taken care of. I'm not taking care of you, he said. I paid for dinner, that's all. That's not how it feels, she admitted. He turned to her then, expression serious but not hard. Tell me how it feels. She hesitated. This was the part where she usually deflected, made a joke, changed the subject. Instead, she exhaled slowly. It feels like I messed up, she said, like I showed you something ugly too soon. He shook his head once. You showed me something real. That's not always better. No, he agreed, but it's usually more useful. She laughed softly, surprised by it. You talk like someone who's learned things the hard way. His mouth twitched. You don't learn the easy way when you've got people depending on you. There it was again. That careful phrasing, people, plural. She felt a pull in her chest, curiosity mixing with caution. You keep saying that. Saying what? People depending on you. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers like he was grounding himself. I'm not trying to impress you, he said, and I'm definitely not trying to rescue anyone. I don't have the energy for either. Then why stay, she asked. He met her gaze. Because leaving when things get uncomfortable is easy. Staying is the part that tells you who you are. That landed hard. She shifted, suddenly aware of how close he felt. Of how quickly this night had gone somewhere she hadn't prepared for. Understanding was a powerful thing. It made you want to lean in. It also made you want to run. She imagined what it would be like to let this grow. To be seen on days when her body hurt too much to hide it. To be around someone who didn't look away from the hard parts. That kind of closeness came with risk. You're dangerous, she said lightly, trying to diffuse the moment. He smiled. That's new. Not like that, she said quickly. I mean, you make it feel safe to say things, and that can get complicated. Everything worth doing gets complicated, he replied. She stared at the street again, heart beating faster now. Being understood wasn't the same as being loved, but it was close enough to make her nervous. She stood up, brushing off her jeans. I should head out, she said, before I overthink this into the ground. He stood too, giving her space again. Okay. She hesitated. Part of her expected him to stop her. Another part was relieved he didn't. As she slung her bag over her shoulder, he spoke, almost like an afterthought. I should probably tell you something, he said. She paused, turning back. What? He took a breath, eyes steady on hers. I've got kids. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, surprise flickering across her face. Twins, he added. The alarm went off at 5:47 a.m., sharp and unforgiving, and Kellen Brooks shut it off before it could ring a second time. He lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening. The apartment was quiet in the way only early mornings could be, the kind of quiet that didn't last. From the next room came the soft sound of feet shifting under blankets, followed by a small cough. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood up, already moving before his body fully caught up. "All right," he muttered to himself. "I'm up." The kitchen light flickered when he turned it on. He made a mental note to replace the bulb, then pushed the thought aside. Coffee first, everything else later. By the time the coffee maker sputtered to life, the twins were awake. "Dad!" Zaire called out, voice thick with sleep. "You forgot to wake us." "I didn't forget," Kellen said, forcing cheer into his voice as he walked down the short hallway. "I just didn't want to rush greatness." That earned a sleepy grin from Zaire and a dramatic eye roll from Nyla, who was already sitting up, hair wild, arms crossed. "We're not great before school," Nyla said. "We're barely people." Kellen smiled despite himself. He leaned against the doorframe, watching them for a second longer than necessary. They looked so much like her some mornings that it knocked the breath out of him if he wasn't careful. Same eyes, same stubborn, set to the jaw. "Clothes on," he said gently. "Breakfast in 10. In the kitchen, he moved through the routine he could have done blindfolded. Toast, peanut butter. Apples sliced thin so Nyla wouldn't complain about the skin. He poured cereal into bowls and added milk, careful not to fill it too high. Zaire hated soggy cereal. Nyla hated dry. They sat at the small table, knees bumping, arguing quietly about whose turn it was to feed the class fish that week. "How much does fish food cost?" Zaire asked suddenly. Spoon paused halfway to his mouth. Kellen stilled. "Why?" "Ms. Harper said we might need more soon," Zaire said. "She said it's cheap, but people say that about stuff that isn't." Nyla nodded. "Like field trips." Kellen kept his tone even. "We'll figure it out." That was his answer to most things. "We'll figure it out." He didn't say it like a question. He said it like a promise. "Dad," Nyla said after a moment, watching him closely, "why don't you buy brand cereal anymore?" There it was, the question wrapped in a small voice. Kellen took a breath. "Because this one tastes the same and costs less." She frowned. Mom liked the other kind. The room went quiet. Even the fridge seemed to hum softer. Kellen nodded once. "She did." Zaire looked between them. "Do you miss Mom all the time?" Kellen swallowed. He didn't like lying to his kids. He also didn't like scaring them. "I miss her enough," he said. "And I love you too more than anything." That seemed to satisfy them, at least for now. Zaire went back to his cereal. Nyla watched him for another second, then nodded and did the same. After breakfast came backpacks, shoes, the hunt for a missing homework folder that turned out to be under the couch. By the time they were out the door, the sky had lightened, the city shaking itself awake. At the bus stop, Nyla tugged on his sleeve. "Are you tired, Dad?" "A little," he admitted. "Is it because you went out last night?" she asked too casually. Kellen stiffened. "Who told you that?" "You smiled," Zaire said. "You only smile like that when something good happens." Kellen huffed out a quiet laugh. "You two are too observant." Nyla tilted her head. "Was it a lady?" He hesitated. That pause said more than he wanted it to. "Maybe," he said carefully. Zaire's face brightened. Nyla's didn't. "Does that mean you won't have time for us?" Nyla asked. Kellen crouched in front of them, eyes level with theirs. "Nothing means that. Ever." Nyla studied him, searching for something. "Is she going to disappear too?" The words hit harder than any bill or late notice ever had. Kellen felt his chest tighten. He forced himself to breathe through it, to stay right there with them instead of letting his mind race. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but if she does, that's not because of you, or me. Sometimes adults leave for reasons that don't make sense." Zaire frowned. "Mom didn't leave on purpose." "No," Kellen said softly. "She didn't." The bus pulled up then, brakes hissing. The moment passed, heavy and unfinished. The twins climbed aboard, waving until they found seats. Kellen waved back until the bus turned the corner and disappeared. He stood there longer than necessary, hands shoved deep into his pockets. At work, the day moved the way it always did. Emails, meetings, numbers on screens that didn't always add up the way they were supposed to. He did his job well. That was the one thing he could control. But his mind kept drifting. The woman on the bench. the way she'd folded in on herself when the card declined, the look on her face when she thought he might judge her. He'd seen that look in the mirror before. At lunch, he sat alone in his car, eating a sandwich he'd made that morning. He stared at his phone longer than necessary, thumb hovering over the screen. Dating still felt wrong sometimes. Like he was breaking some quiet rule he'd never agreed to, but felt bound by anyway. Loving again felt like tempting fate, like asking life to take something else. And yet, he remembered the way she'd laughed when she relaxed, the way she'd been brave enough to admit her fear instead of hiding behind jokes. That kind of honesty was rare. That kind of honesty was dangerous. By the time he picked the twins up from after-school care, his head ached from thinking too much. They burst out the door, loud and full of stories, energy bouncing off them in waves. "Dad," Zaire said as they walked to the car, "if you like that lady, you should see her again." Nyla shot him a look. "You don't know that." "I do," Zaire insisted. "Dad smiles when he talks about her." Kellen raised an eyebrow. "I do?" Nyla crossed her arms. "I don't want you to be sad again." He stopped walking and turned to them. "Hey, look at me." They both did. "I'm already sad sometimes," he said gently. "That doesn't mean I can't also be happy." Neela's eyes searched his face. "You promise you won't forget us?" Kellen's throat tightened. "I promise you are my whole world." They seemed to accept that, at least enough to move on to arguing about snacks. That night, after homework and dinner, and the long negotiation that was bedtime, Kellen sat alone on the couch. The apartment felt bigger without their voices filling it. He picked up his phone again. He thought about all the reasons he shouldn't. The risk, the timing, the fear of failing at something else. Then he thought about the bench, the silence, the way staying had felt like the right thing to do. He typed a message, deleted it, then typed it again. When he finally hit send, he leaned back and closed his eyes. Whatever came next, he had chosen it. And for the first time in a long while, that didn't feel like a mistake. She was already waiting when he arrived, sitting on the low stone wall near the park entrance, legs crossed at the ankles, hands tucked into the sleeves of a worn hoodie. She looked up when she heard his footsteps and smiled. A real one this time, not the careful kind she'd worn on their first night. "You're early," she said. "So are you," he replied. They stood there for a second, both unsure how to start, until Zaire broke the moment by sprinting past them, arms out, pretending to be an airplane. "I'm flying," he announced loudly. Nyla followed more slowly, backpack bouncing against her back, eyes fixed on the woman like she was still deciding something important. Kellen cleared his throat. "This is the kids I told you about." She crouched down a little so she wasn't towering over them. "Hi, I'm really glad to finally meet you." Zaire grinned immediately. "Dad says you're funny." She laughed, surprised. "He does." "Only when you're not around," Nyla said flatly. Kellen groaned. "I'm surrounded by traitors." That earned a small smile from Nyla, which felt like a win. They walked into the park together, the late afternoon sun slanting through the trees. It wasn't fancy, just a public space with cracked sidewalks, a playground that had seen better days, and a few benches worn smooth from years of use. It felt safe, neutral, like no one had to pretend. They spread a blanket near the playground. Kellen unpacked peanut butter sandwiches wrapped in foil. She pulled out a paper bag with cookies inside, slightly misshapen but clearly homemade. "I work near a bakery," she said quickly. "They were extra." Zaire's eyes lit up. "Extra cookies are the best kind." Neela eyed them carefully. "Are they chocolate chip?" "Of course," she said. "I'm not a monster." That did it. Nyla laughed, a small sound, but real. They ate and talked. Nothing heavy, nothing forced. Zaire told a long story about a class project that had gone wrong. Neela corrected him on at least 3 details. Kellen watched them, the way they leaned in without realizing it, the way her attention stayed fully on them. When she stood up to stretch, she did it slowly, one hand pressed briefly to her lower back. Kellen noticed. He always noticed things like that. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Yeah," she said. "Just need a second." He didn't press. He shifted the blanket so she could sit more comfortably. It wasn't a big gesture, Just an adjustment. She caught it anyway. Later, when Zaire begged her to push him on the swing, she hesitated. Kellen started to step in, but she waved him off. "I've got it," she said. She pushed gently, careful with her movements, smiling through the effort. Zaire laughed, legs pumping. After a few pushes, she stepped back, breathing a little heavier. Nyla watched closely. "You don't like swings?" "I do," she said. "My back just argues with me sometimes." Nyla nodded, thoughtful. "Mine argues with me when I have to do homework." She smiled. "Sounds like it runs in the family." The afternoon stretched on easily. No pressure, no expectations, just time. Later that week, they met at the library. The kids disappeared into the children's section while Kellen and her sat at a small table near the windows. Sunlight spilled across the floor, dust floating in it like tiny stars. "I didn't know dates could be this quiet," she whispered. He smiled. "It's underrated." They talked about books they loved, about jobs they didn't, about how strange it felt to enjoy something simple without waiting for it to fall apart. Still, every now and then, Kellen felt the old fear rise up. The one that whispered that happiness came with a price, that letting someone close meant giving life another chance to take something away. When the kids returned with a stack of books taller than the table, she helped them check them out. Her movements were careful again, slow but steady. "You don't have to carry those," Kellen said. "I know," she replied, "but I want to." That night after dinner at his place, she stayed longer than planned. The kids sprawled on the floor coloring. Nyla insisted she draw too. "I'm bad at it," she warned. "Perfect," Nyla said. "So are we." She sat cross-legged on the rug, easing herself down with a quiet breath. Kellen watched from the kitchen, heart full and uneasy all at once. Seeing her here felt right, too right. When she laughed, when she leaned closer to show Zaire how to shade a drawing, something in him loosened. Something else tightened. After the kids went to bed, she lingered by the door. "This was nice," she said. "Really nice." He nodded. "Yeah." They stood there, not touching, the space between them charged with things neither was ready to name. "I should go," she said, even though neither of them moved. "Okay," he said, even though he didn't want her to. She hesitated. "I like this," she admitted, "but I need to say something before it goes any further." He braced himself. "All right. I don't want to rush," she said. "I can't afford to. Emotionally, I mean." Relief flickered through him. "Neither can I." That honesty settled something between them. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Walks after dinner, homework at the kitchen table, cheap takeout split 3 ways. She learned which nights Nyla needed extra patience and which mornings Zaire needed extra encouragement. She learned, too, when to sit down before her back reminded her who was in charge. Kellen learned to notice without hovering, to offer help without making it feel like help. Still, there were moments that shook her. One afternoon, she arrived early to pick the kids up from school. She waited near the office, scrolling through her phone, when she heard a voice she recognized. Not Kellen's, someone else. "I don't know how much longer we can extend this," a woman said, tone tight. "The account is already behind." She looked up, heart thudding, and saw a staff member speaking quietly with another adult. She didn't catch every word, but she caught enough. Payment, arrangement, temporary. Her stomach dropped. She stepped back, out of sight, pulse racing. The pieces shifted in her mind, rearranging into something colder. When Kellen appeared with the kids a few minutes later, smiling like everything was fine, she smiled back. But the ground under her felt less steady now. And as they walked away from the school, she realized with a jolt that whatever he'd told her about his situation, it wasn't the whole story. The envelope was waiting on the counter when Kellen got home, sitting right where he'd left it that morning, thin and white and impossible to ignore. He knew what it was before he touched it. He always did. Mail like that had a weight to it, even before you opened it. He dropped his keys in the bowl by the door and stood there longer than necessary, jacket still on, listening to the apartment. The twins were at aftercare for another 30 minutes. The silence should have felt like a break. Instead, it pressed in on him. He picked up the envelope and turned it over, scanning the return address. Bank. He exhaled slowly through his nose and slid a finger under the flap. Past due, final reminder. Language that sounded calm but carried teeth. He folded the letter once, then again, and set it back down like maybe it would stay put if he didn't give it too much attention. He went to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, drank it too fast, then leaned against the counter with both hands braced flat. Another envelope sat nearby, this one thicker. He didn't need to open it either. Insurance. He picked it up anyway. Denied. He let out a short laugh that died as soon as it started. Of course it was denied. It always was. They'd covered part of the hospital stay after his wife died, enough to make it look like help, not enough to stop the bills from coming. Every appeal ended the same way. Polite words, firm lines, no room to argue. He shoved the letters into a drawer and closed it harder than necessary. By the time the twins burst through the door later, backpack swinging, the smile was back on his face. It was automatic now, the way a light flipped on. "Dad," Zaire said, dropping his shoes in the middle of the floor. "Can we have pizza tonight?" Kellen glanced at the fridge, already doing the math. "We've got leftovers." Nyla frowned. "Again?" "Again," he said gently. "Pizza tomorrow." She accepted that with a sigh that felt far too grown for her age. They settled at the table with their homework, pencils scratching, questions flying. "Dad," Zaire said, not looking up, "why do grown-ups get so many letters?" Kellen froze for half a beat. "Because we're popular." Nyla looked at him over the top of her workbook. "That's not true," he smiled. "You caught me." She watched him a moment longer, eyes sharp. "Are we okay?" That question landed hard. "We are," he said, "always." She nodded, but she didn't look convinced. Later that night, after bedtime, Kellen sat at the small desk in the corner of the living room. The laptop hummed softly as he logged into accounts he'd been avoiding. Numbers stared back at him, red and unyielding. Mortgage, medical, school fees. Each one felt manageable on its own. Together they crowded him, leaving no space to breathe. His phone buzzed. A message from her. "Hope your night's going okay." He stared at the screen, thumb hovering. He wanted to tell her all of it. The letters, the fear, the way his chest tightened every time the phone rang with an unknown number. Instead he typed, "Yeah, long day, but we're good." He hated how easy that lie came. Across town, she sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, staring at his reply. She could hear the echo of that conversation at the school office. The words she wasn't meant to catch but couldn't unhear. Temporary arrangement. Behind. She set the phone down and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Her back ached in that dull, familiar way that told her she'd done too much that day. She pressed a heating pad against it and closed her eyes. Staying felt good. That was the problem. She'd started to imagine herself there in small ways, helping with homework, grocery lists on the fridge, mornings that felt less lonely. Those thoughts scared her more than being alone ever had. She picked up her phone again and typed, then erased, then typed again. "You don't have to pretend with me." She didn't send it. The next few days moved fast. Kellen fielded calls at work, stepping into stairwells and empty conference rooms to keep his voice low. He filled out forms during lunch breaks, scanned documents on his phone, waited on hold until the line went dead. Every no landed like a quiet punch. At home, he stayed busy, cleaning, cooking, fixing things that didn't really need fixing. Anything to keep his hands moving. She noticed the change immediately. He laughed less. His answers got shorter. When she reached for his hand once while they watched the kids play, he squeezed back, but his eyes stayed somewhere else. "You okay?" she asked him later when the twins were distracted. "Just tired," he said. She studied him. "You've been tired." He smiled. "Occupational hazard." She didn't push. Not yet. The next letter came on a Thursday. This one wasn't thin. It was stiff, official, the kind that didn't pretend to be friendly. He opened it at the kitchen counter, heart pounding. Final notice. He sat down heavily, the chair scraping against the floor. For a long moment, he just stared at the paper, words blurring together. Zaire wandered in, rubbing his eyes. "Dad?" Kellen folded the letter quickly and tucked it under a stack of mail. Hey, buddy, you should be in bed. Couldn't sleep, Zaire said. He glanced at the counter. Is something wrong? Kellen forced a smile. Nah, grown-up stuff. Zaire nodded, then paused. You always say that when something's wrong. Kellen closed his eyes for a second. You're too smart. Zaire climbed into his lap without asking, curling up like he had when he was younger. Kellen wrapped an arm around him, breathing in the familiar smell of shampoo and crayons. We're okay, Kellen said softly, more to himself than to his son. Zaire nodded, trusting him completely. That trust weighed more than any letter ever could. Later that night, Kellen finally told her a part of the truth. Not everything, just enough to feel honest. The school's been calling, he said, voice low as they stood outside, the city humming around them. Fees, paperwork, stuff I'm handling. Her chest tightened. Handling how? I'll figure it out. She looked at him, really looked. The lines in his face felt deeper now, the tired harder to hide. You don't have to do it alone, she said. He shook his head. I do. That answer scared her. The next morning, as she walked past the school office, she saw a man leaning against the wall near the entrance. Tall, well-dressed, arms crossed, expression sharp. He turned as she passed, eyes narrowing. So, he said, voice smooth and cold. You must be the woman making things complicated. So this is her. The words landed before she even saw him clearly. A man stepped into her path near the school entrance, blocking the sun just enough to make her squint. He was tall, sharp suit, shoes too clean for the cracked sidewalk. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm sorry, she said, stopping short. He looked her up and down slowly, not trying to hide it. You're the one spending time with my brother-in-law's kids. Her stomach tightened. I don't think this is an appropriate. Marcus Freeman, he said, cutting her off, offering his hand like it was a formality he didn't care if she accepted. Kellen's wife was my sister. She didn't take his hand. Oh, she said. I didn't realize. Of course you didn't, Marcus said. Kellen doesn't like to talk about family matters. She folded her arms, the familiar ache in her back flaring as she shifted her weight. If you have something to say, you should probably say it to him. Marcus smiled again. This one was colder. I am. Through you. Before she could respond, he leaned in just enough to lower his voice. Do you have any idea how fragile his life is right now? Her chest tightened. I know he's under pressure. You don't know the half of it, Marcus said. Mortgage behind, school fees stacking up, insurance refusing to cover things that should have been handled years ago. Her heart thudded. That's none of my business. It becomes your business when you're around his kids, Marcus snapped, when you start confusing them. She felt heat rush to her face. I'm not confusing anyone. A woman like you, he said, eyes flicking briefly to her posture, the way she shifted again. Careful. You think that's stability? Her breath caught. Excuse me. You heard me, Marcus said. Kellen doesn't need another responsibility. He already has enough to carry. Anger flared, sharp and sudden. I'm not something he carries. Marcus chuckled softly. Everyone is a weight when you don't have room. She took a step back, pulse racing. You don't know me. I know enough, he replied. I know Kellen has a pattern. He feels sorry for people, thinks he can fix things by being patient and kind. It never works. That's not true, she said, even as doubt crept in. Marcus leaned closer, voice dropping. My sister was strong. She worked. She didn't complain. She didn't need accommodations. The words stung more than she expected. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Marcus said, and Kellen can't afford fair right now. He needs someone who adds, not someone who needs. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. You're crossing a line. Marcus straightened, smoothing his jacket. I'm drawing one. For the kids. She stared at him, heart pounding, every instinct telling her to walk away. To end this conversation before it carved itself deeper into her. You should think about what you're doing, Marcus added. People break when they carry too much, and broken people make broken homes. That word lodged itself in her chest. Broken. Marcus turned and walked away, leaving her standing there. The sounds of children laughing and doors opening and closing, suddenly too loud. She didn't move for a long moment. Her back screamed now, the familiar pain sharpening as her body reacted to the stress. She pressed a hand to the brick wall beside her and closed her eyes. Breathing through it. Broken. The word echoed as she walked away from the school, every step heavier than the last. That evening, Kellen noticed immediately. "You're quiet," he said as they stood in his kitchen, the twins arguing softly over a board game in the living room. "I'm just tired," she replied. He frowned slightly. "You've been tired." She forced a smile. "Guess I'm consistent." He studied her, the way he always did when something didn't sit right. "Did something happen today?" "No," she said too quickly. "Nothing important." The lie tasted bitter. Later, when the twins were in bed, Kellen sat beside her on the couch. The space between them felt wider than usual. "You sure you're okay?" he asked again. She stared at her hands. "Do you ever feel like maybe you don't get to want things?" His jaw tightened. "All the time," she swallowed. "Like wanting something good might cost you something else?" He nodded slowly. "That's been my whole life since they were born." She looked at him then, really looked. The exhaustion he tried to hide, the weight he carried so carefully. "Marcus talked to me today," she said finally. His shoulders stiffened. "What?" "He had a lot to say," she continued, voice steady even as her chest tightened. "About money, about pressure, about me." Kellen's eyes darkened. "What did he say?" She hesitated. Saying it out loud would make it real, permanent. "He thinks I make things harder," she said. "That I'm another problem you don't need." "That's not true," Kellen said immediately. "Isn't it?" she asked quietly. He reached for her hand, but she pulled back before he could touch it. "Don't," she said. "Please." The hurt on his face was immediate. "I don't want to be another thing you have to manage," she went on. "Another thing you have to protect." "You're not," he said, voice firm. "You're a choice." Her eyes burned. "You don't get to choose if it hurts your kids." "They care about you," he said. "They like you." "That's what scares me," she admitted. "Because if this goes wrong—" "Why are you assuming it will?" he asked. She stood up slowly, careful of her back, careful of herself. "Because things always do when people like me get hopeful." He stood too. "You're not broken." The word hit her like a slap. Her breath caught, and she turned away so he wouldn't see the tears gathering. Marcus's voice echoed in her head. "Broken people make broken homes." "I think I need some space," she said, voice low. "Just to think." Kellen stared at her. "Space from what?" "From this," she said, gesturing between them, "before it gets harder to step back." The silence that followed felt heavy, unfinished. She grabbed her bag and headed for the door. Kellen followed, stopping a few feet away, respecting the boundary she'd just drawn. "Is this because of what Marcus said?" he asked. She paused, hand on the door. "It didn't help," she replied. She left before he could say anything else. That night she lay awake staring at the ceiling, phone face down on the nightstand. Every time it buzzed, she ignored it. Across town, Kellen sat alone on the couch, staring at the dark screen of his phone, the weight of everything pressing in at once. If this story has hit something close to home, don't look away. Stories like this don't happen by accident. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay with us. The next chapter will test everything you think you know about staying, leaving, and what it really means to protect the people you love. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while she stood at the sink, staring at the same spot on the wall like it might answer her back. She didn't need to look to know who it was. The buzzing stopped. A few seconds passed. Then it buzzed again. She turned the faucet on just to have something louder than her thoughts. By the time she picked the phone up, the screen had gone dark. She told herself it was better this way. Space meant clarity. Distance meant safety. That's what she repeated while she moved through her days, careful and controlled, the same way she managed everything else that could hurt her if she wasn't paying attention. She answered texts hours late, sometimes not at all. When he asked if she wanted to come by for dinner, she said her back was acting up. When he suggested a walk, she said she had work early. None of it was a lie. None of it was the whole truth either. At night, she lay on her side with a pillow tucked between her knees, phone face down, heart heavy. She thought about the twins laughing in the park, about Neela's serious little face when she concentrated, about the way Zaire ran full speed into joy without checking first. Broken people make broken homes. The words followed her everywhere. Across town, Kellen checked his phone more than he cared to admit. At stoplights, in elevator mirrors, between emails at work. Every time it lit up, his chest tightened just a little. Every time it wasn't her, it tightened more. He told himself not to push, that she'd asked for space, and he needed to respect that. Respect had become his default setting. It was safer than hope. Still, he typed messages he didn't send. Deleted drafts filled his notes app. Simple things. You okay? Kids asked about you. I miss you. He never sent them. The twins noticed before he was ready to admit it. Is she sick again? Zaire asked one evening as Kellen stirred pasta on the stove. Kellen kept his back turned. She's just busy. Nyla leaned against the counter, arms folded. She doesn't come over anymore. People have lives, Kellen said too quickly. Nyla frowned. We're people. The spoon paused mid-stir. After dinner, Zaire dragged out the board game she'd played with them last time, setting it on the table with care. Maybe she'll come tomorrow, he said hopefully. Maybe, Kellen replied. Tomorrow came and went. At school pickup, Nyla lagged behind, tying and retying her shoe while Zaire ran ahead. Kellen waited, watching her small hands fumble with the laces. Dad, she said quietly, not looking up. Did we do something wrong? His chest tightened. What? No. She stopped coming, Nyla said. People do that when they're mad. Kellen crouched in front of her. She's not mad at you or your brother. Then why? Nyla asked. He searched for an answer that wouldn't scare her. Sometimes adults need time to figure things out. Nyla's eyes filled. Is it our fault? The question cut deeper than anything Marcus had said. Kellen pulled her into a hug, holding her tight. Never! Do you hear me? Never! She nodded against his chest, but he knew that didn't erase the worry. That night, after the twins were asleep, Kellen sat at the kitchen table with a stack of unopened mail. He opened one, then another. Numbers stared back at him, unforgiving. He thought about calling her, about telling her everything, the notices, the pressure, the way he felt like he was standing on a trap door that could drop at any moment. Pride stopped him. He'd promised himself he wouldn't make someone else carry his weight. He'd sworn he'd protect his kids from chaos, even if it meant holding it all alone. At her place, she stood in front of the mirror, stretching carefully, wincing as pain flared and settled again. She hated that her body dictated so much, hated that Marcus's words had found a place to live inside her. She imagined the twins watching her struggle to stand up from the floor. Imagined them learning that love meant waiting, adjusting, limiting themselves. She couldn't do that to them. Her phone buzzed again. This time she looked. A missed call. Him. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She could call back. She could end this distance right now. Instead, she locked the phone and set it down. The next few days blurred together. Work, home, quiet evenings that felt too empty. She avoided the park they'd gone to together, took longer routes to avoid passing the school. Kellen stopped suggesting plans, not because he didn't want to see her, but because every unanswered message felt like a small rejection he didn't have room for. The twins grew quieter. Zaire asked fewer questions. Nyla watched more closely. One night, as Kellen tucked them in, Nyla held on to his hand longer than usual. Dad, she whispered, if people leave, does that mean they didn't like us enough? Kellen swallowed hard. No, sometimes it means they liked you so much they got scared. Nyla thought about that. That's dumb. He huffed a quiet laugh. I agree. After he closed their door, Kellen stood in the hallway, forehead pressed lightly against the wall, breathing through the weight in his chest. He felt like he was failing at something he didn't even know how to name. Across town, she sat on the edge of her bed, finally breaking. Tears slid down her face, silent and hot. She hated herself for pulling away. hated the relief that came with it. Her phone buzzed again. This time she didn't ignore it. She grabbed her keys, heart racing, pain and resolve mixing into something that felt like urgency. She didn't think it through, didn't talk herself out of it. She drove across town with her hands tight on the wheel, rehearsing what she'd say and failing every time. By the time she pulled up outside his place, her chest hurt and her back screamed, but she didn't slow down. She climbed the steps and knocked, breath held, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. The knock came hard and fast, loud enough to wake the dead or scare the living. Kellen froze in the middle of the living room, remote still in his hand, the TV casting moving shadows across the walls. For half a second, he thought he'd imagined it. Then it came again. He didn't check the clock. He didn't look through the peephole. He just opened the door. She stood there, breath uneven, keys clenched in her fists like she'd run the whole way. Her eyes were red, not from crying just now, but from holding it back for too long. The porch light caught the tension in her shoulders, the way she stood like she was bracing for impact. "We need to talk," she said. Kellen stepped aside without a word. The door shut behind her with a dull click that sounded too final. The apartment felt smaller instantly, like the walls had leaned in to listen. From down the hall came the faint sound of a cartoon playing in one of the kids' rooms. Low enough to be background noise, but close enough to remind them both what was at stake. She didn't take off her jacket. She didn't sit. Kellen waited, hands loose at his sides, heart pounding. "You okay?" She laughed once, sharp and humorless. "No, but I think you already knew that." Silence stretched, the kind that dared someone to blink first. "You disappeared," he said finally, not accusing, just stating a fact that hurt. She flinched. "I needed space. You could have said that without shutting me out." "I did say that," she snapped, then stopped herself, pressing her lips together. "I just didn't know how to stay without making things worse." He ran a hand over his face. "You don't make things worse." "That's not true," she shot back, "and you know it." The words landed hard. He took a step toward her, then stopped himself. "Say what you mean," he said. "Don't dance around it." She exhaled slowly, like she was bracing herself. "I mean that I see what this costs you. Every day. I see the bills you don't talk about. The calls you take in stairwells. The way you pretend everything's fine for the kids. That's my job," he said. "And where do I fit in that?" she asked. "Because from where I'm standing, I'm another thing you have to manage." His jaw tightened. "You're not a thing." "I'm a responsibility," she insisted. "Someone who needs patience, adjustments, someone whose body doesn't always cooperate." "That doesn't make you a burden." She laughed again, louder this time, pain bleeding through it. "You say that because you're kind, not because it's true." He felt something snap then, not anger, but fear. "Why are you deciding this for me?" "Because someone has to," she said. "Because you won't." "Because I'm scared?" he shot back. "Yes," she said immediately. "Because you're scared, and because you think being scared means you don't get to want anything." The words hit too close. He turned away, pacing once across the room, then back. "You don't understand." "Then explain it to me," she said. "Stop protecting me from things I already feel." He stopped in front of her, chest rising and falling. "I'm afraid of failing," he admitted. "There, is that clear enough?" Her eyes softened for a split second. "Failing at what?" "At everything," he said. "At being enough for my kids, at keeping a roof over their heads, at letting someone in and watching it all fall apart again." She swallowed. "You don't think I'm afraid?" "I think you run when you are," he said quietly. "That's rich," she snapped. "You hide." The room crackled with it now, words sharp, emotion stripped bare. "I heard what Marcus said," she blurted out. His face went still. "What?" "He told me I was another weight," she continued, voice shaking now. "That you don't need someone like me. That broken people make broken homes." Kellen's hands curled into fists. "He had no right." "He said what you won't," she replied. "What everyone's thinking." "No," he said firmly. "That's what he's thinking." She shook her head. "It doesn't matter. The thought is there now." She turned away from him, pacing carefully, one hand pressed to her back, as pain flared and settled. I walk into your life and I see kids who already lost their mom. I see a man barely holding things together. And then I look at myself and I think, who am I to add to that? You're someone who cares, he said. Someone who shows up. And leaves, she countered. Because you don't give yourself a chance to stay, he said, frustration edging his voice. You decide you're too much before anyone else can. She stopped and faced him, eyes wet but fierce. Because every time I stay, it costs someone something. That's not how love works, he said. Then how does it work? She demanded. Because all I see is sacrifice. He stared at her, chest tight. Love is choosing to stay even when it's hard. She shook her head slowly. Love shouldn't hurt the people you care about. It hurts when you don't let it in, he shot back. They stood there breathing hard, both exhausted, both right and wrong in equal measure. I don't want to be the reason your kids have to worry, she said softly. I don't want them watching you choose between fixing a roof and taking care of me. You think that's what this is? He asked. A choice like that? She nodded. I do. He laughed then, a short, broken sound. You think I haven't already been making those choices, long before you showed up? She looked at him, really looked, and saw the cracks he'd been hiding, the fear he carried like a second spine, the way his shoulders never fully relaxed. I don't want to watch you break, she whispered. I'm already breaking, he said. I just don't do it in front of people. That landed heavy. She sank onto the edge of the couch, suddenly drained. I keep thinking if I step back now, it'll hurt less later. For who? He asked. For everyone, she said. For me, for you, for them. You don't get to decide what hurts my kids, he said, voice firm but tired. They get to feel what they feel. She looked up at him, tears finally spilling over. I'm tired of feeling like a problem. He crossed the room in 2 strides and stopped in front of her, kneeling so they were eye level. Look at me. She hesitated, then did. You are not a problem, he said, voice rough. You're not broken. You're not ruining anything. Her breath hitched. Then why does it feel like I am? Because you've been carrying that lie for a long time, he replied. And someone finally said it out loud. She closed her eyes, a sob slipping free before she could stop it. I don't know how to be easy. I don't need easy, he said. I need honest. The room went quiet then. No shouting, no movement. Just the weight of everything they'd said hanging between them. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, staring at the floor. I don't know what to do. Neither do I, he admitted. I just know I don't want to lose you because we were both too scared to be real. Silence followed her confession, thick and heavy, stretching longer than either of them expected. From the hallway came the soft sound of footsteps. A small voice broke through the quiet. Dad? Dad! The word cut through the room like a small light turning on in the dark. Kellen turned first. Nyla stood at the end of the hallway, hair tangled from sleep, one hand gripping the doorframe. Zaire was half a step behind her, rubbing his eyes, blanket dragging on the floor. Both of them were blinking, trying to understand why the house felt loud, even though no one was shouting anymore. I heard voices, Zaire said. Are you mad? The question landed softly and still managed to break something open. Kellen stood up slowly, heart pounding. No, buddy, we're not mad. Neela's eyes moved past him, landing on her. She took everything in at once. The red eyes, the tense shoulders, the way she was sitting on the edge of the couch like she didn't know if she was staying or leaving. You're here, Nyla said. Her voice wasn't accusing. It wasn't relieved either. It was careful. Yes, she replied quietly. I'm here. Nyla nodded once, then walked into the room and sat down on the floor, legs crossed. Zaire followed, flopping down beside her without ceremony. You were crying, Zaire said matter of fact. She wiped her cheeks again, embarrassed. A little. Dad cries sometimes too, Zaire added. He does it in the bathroom. Kellen let out a breath that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. Nyla looked between the two adults for a long moment, then asked the question no one wanted, but everyone needed. Are you leaving? The room went very still. She felt her chest tighten. This was the moment she'd been afraid of. the moment where a wrong answer could live in a child's memory longer than it should. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "I'm trying to figure out what's best." "For who?" Nyla asked. The simplicity of it stunned her. "For everyone," she said. Zaire frowned. "That doesn't make sense." She tilted her head. "Why not?" "Because when Dad is sad," Zaire said slowly, "everything feels bad, even when we're okay." Kellen closed his eyes. Nyla nodded. "When you're here, he smiles more." That was it. That was the thing no adult argument could compete with. She felt the truth of it hit her all at once, heavy and undeniable. She'd been so focused on not causing pain that she hadn't seen the pain her absence created. "I don't want to make things harder," she whispered. Neela scooted closer, voice steady in that way only kids could manage. "Things are already hard." Zaire leaned back on his hands. "But they're better when people help." Kellen dropped down onto the couch, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. For a moment, he didn't speak at all. "I've been trying to do everything myself," he said finally, "because I thought that's what being strong meant." Neela looked at him. "That's dumb," he snorted despite himself. "You're not wrong." She watched him, something like relief softening her face. "Mom used to ask for help." That name hung in the air. Not sharp, not crushing, just present. "She did," Kellen said quietly. "And she wasn't weak," Zaire added. "No," Kellen agreed. "She wasn't." The silence that followed felt different now, less heavy, more open. She took a shaky breath. "I've been scared that if I stay, I'll take something away from you." Kellen looked at her, eyes raw and honest. "Staying doesn't take. Leaving does." That truth settled in her bones. "I don't know how to fix everything," she said. "I don't need you to," he replied. "I need you to stop deciding you're the problem." Zaire raised his hand like he was in class. "Can I say something?" Kellen nodded. "Always." Zaire shrugged. "I think grown-ups make things confusing. You both look sad, but you also look like you want to be here. So maybe you should just be here." Neela sighed dramatically. "That's what I was thinking." She laughed then, really laughed, through tears that still clung to her lashes. "You two are very wise." "We know," Nyla said. Kellen wiped his face and straightened. Something had shifted in him too. The wall he'd been holding up alone finally cracked enough to let air in. "I can't keep pretending I've got this handled," he said. "I don't." She nodded. "You don't have to." He looked at the kids. "I might need help, from people who know what they're doing." Zaire's eyes lit up. "Like teachers?" "Like teachers," Kellen said, "and counselors, and programs that exist for a reason." Nyla leaned back against the couch. "See? Easy." It wasn't easy, but it was possible. Over the next few days, the house filled with papers that weren't just bills, phone calls that didn't end in dead air, meetings with people who listened instead of judging. A counselor at the school helped him apply for tuition assistance. A housing advocate explained options he didn't know existed. A social worker talked to him like a person, not a problem. Asking for help felt strange at first, like stepping onto a bridge he'd always avoided. But with every step, the weight on his chest eased just a little. She stayed. Not in the dramatic way she'd imagined love was supposed to work. She stayed in small, steady ways, sitting at the table while forms were filled out, helping the kids with homework, taking breaks when her back demanded it, and not apologizing for it. One afternoon, as she waited outside the housing office, she overheard two people talking behind her. "It's not guaranteed," one said. "These things take time." Her stomach dropped. That night, she told Kellen what she'd heard. He didn't hide it this time. "I know," he said. "Nothing's certain yet." Fear crept back in, quieter now but still there. "So what happens if it doesn't work?" she asked. He met her gaze. "Then we keep asking. We keep trying. Together." She nodded, holding on to that word. Together. The kids sensed the shift too. The house felt lighter, even with uncertainty hanging over it. Laughter came easier. Questions didn't feel like threats. One evening, as they all sat on the floor playing a game, Neela looked up suddenly. "You're not leaving, right?" she asked. She didn't hesitate this time. No, I'm not. Nyla smiled and went back to the game like that was settled. The outcome of the house was still unknown. Letters still came. Decisions still hung in the air. But something else had changed. Time moved forward, and with it came the sense that whatever happened next wouldn't look like this moment. It would be something new. The bench was colder than she remembered. She felt it through her jeans the moment she sat down, the chills seeping in slow and honest, the way truth always did when you finally stopped avoiding it. Evening settled around them, the city easing into that familiar blue-gray hush where traffic softened and streetlights blinked awake one by one. Kellen sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, not close enough to rush anything. The twins were a few steps away, racing each other from one end of the sidewalk to the other, laughter cutting through the noise of passing cars. "Careful," he called out. "We are," Zaire shouted back, already not being careful at all. Neela skidded to a stop near the bench and pointed at the plaque bolted to the wood. "Dad, what does that say?" Kellen leaned forward to read it. "It says this bench was donated by a family who wanted people to rest." Nyla considered that. "That's nice." "It is," he said. She watched the exchange quietly. Months ago, this bench had been the place where her chest caved in, where shame sat heavy and unmoving. She remembered staring at the ground, convinced that moment had defined her. Now it felt different. Not lighter, exactly, just steadier. Kellen exhaled slowly, hands resting on his knees. "I got the call this morning." Her heart skipped. "And?" "The program approved the extension," he said. "The mortgage gets restructured, lower payments, longer term." Relief washed over her so fast she had to put a hand on the bench to steady herself. "So, the house?" "We're staying," he said, a small smile breaking through. "It took paperwork and meetings and swallowing a lot of pride. But yeah, we're staying." She closed her eyes for a second, letting the sound of the twins laughing fill the space where fear had lived for too long. "I'm proud of you," she said. He shook his head. "I didn't do it alone." "No," she agreed. "You didn't." The twins barreled back toward them, breathless. "Dad," Zaire said, skidding to a stop. "Are we going home now?" "Soon," Kellen replied. "You good?" Zaire nodded. "Yeah, just wanted to check." Nyla lingered, looking between the two adults. "You both look different." "How?" she asked. Nyla shrugged. "Less tight." Kellen laughed quietly. "That's one way to put it." They watched the kids wander off again, quieter now, sticks in hand, inventing some game that made sense only to them. Kellen leaned back against the bench. "I used to think staying meant holding everything together by myself," he said. "Like if I just tried harder, nothing would fall apart." "And now," she asked. "And now I think staying means letting people see when it's already cracked," he said. "Letting them help hold it." She nodded. "I used to think staying meant hurting people eventually. Like I was a delay, not a solution." He turned to her. "And now?" "And now I think leaving was the easier lie," she said. "Staying is the harder truth." The city moved around them, unaware of the quiet victory happening on a worn bench at the edge of a sidewalk. They didn't have more money than before. Their bank accounts hadn't suddenly filled. His car still rattled when it started. Her back still demanded rest on days she wished it wouldn't. But the panic had eased. They'd learned what questions to ask, who to call, how to admit when they were overwhelmed before it turned into silence. They learned to plan dinners that stretched a little further, to laugh about it instead of pretending it didn't matter, to say not today without guilt. Kellen glanced at her. "You know you don't have to prove anything to be here." She smiled. "I know. And you don't have to fix anything," he added. She nudged him lightly with her shoulder. "I'm still going to help." He smiled back. "I wouldn't stop you." The twins returned, this time dragging their feet. "Can we come sit?" Nyla asked. "Of course," Kellen said. They squeezed onto the bench, Zaire leaning into Kellen's side, Nyla pressing against her hip. It was cramped and a little awkward, and completely right. Zaire looked up suddenly. "Are we rich now?" She laughed softly. "What makes you ask that?" "People say when things get better, you're rich," he explained. Kellen exchanged a look with her before answering. "We're not rich like that." Zaire frowned. Oh, but we're rich in other ways, Kellen continued. We've got time. We've got help. We've got each other. Zaire thought about it, then nodded. That's okay. Neela leaned her head against her shoulder. You stayed. She swallowed, emotion tightening her throat. Yeah, I did. They sat there as the sky darkened, streetlights reflecting in the windows of passing cars. No big declarations. No promises spoken out loud. Just presence. Later, when they stood to leave, Kellen paused, looking at the bench one last time. Funny, he said. This is where everything fell apart. And where it started to come back together, she replied. He reached for her hand, not rushed, not hesitant. She took it. The twins walked ahead, arguing about who won the race earlier, their voices floating back toward them. If you've stayed with this story until now, thank you. Stories like this matter because they remind us that staying doesn't mean having it all figured out. It means choosing honesty over pride, partnership over fear, and people over appearances. If this story spoke to you, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice might be the one someone else needs to hear today. They walked home together, not rich, not perfect, but no longer alone, and that, in the end, was enough.